The broom crashed to the floor with a deafening snap, the sound slicing through the grand auditorium like a gunshot. Heads turned, conversations halted mid-sentence, silverware clinked against china and fell silent. All eyes locked onto the stage, where a boy stood frozen, his dark eyes wide with horror. Miguel de la Cruz, janitor's son, invisible nobody, clutched the broken handle like a lifeline, his knuckles white. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then, from the VIP section, a mocking laugh cut the tension like a blade. Well, sneered Ethan Mercer, draped in a designer suit, his voice dripping with superiority. Looks like the janitor's son wants to audition. A ripple of laughter rolled through the audience, starting with the elite students of Crestmont Academy, spreading like wildfire. Miguel's face burned hot, his father's face, half hidden in the shadows near the catering tables, blanched with shame. Miguel opened his mouth to explain. This was a mistake. He was just cleaning. He didn't mean to disturb the gala, but the words strangled in his throat. Another voice, high and sweet and laced with venom, chimed in from the front row. "Come on, show us some moves, broom boy." It was Zara Langston, Ethan's smug shadow. More laughter. Phones whipped out, camera flashes blinding him. Miguel's heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. The weight of 1,000 eyes crushed down on him. His father's job, their tiny apartment, their late rent, it all hung in the balance. Humiliation, survival, they warred inside him. "Let's see it," Ethan crowed, stepping onto the edge of the stage, arms wide like a ringmaster presenting a circus act. "Dance. For us!" The audience, hungry for more spectacle, began to clap mockingly, a slow, sarcastic rhythm that echoed against the domed ceiling. Miguel's throat went dry. He looked out over the crowd, the glimmering gowns, the polished loafers, the sea of amused faces. He didn't belong here, he never had. For one heartbeat he thought about running, just dropping the broken broom, sprinting off stage, hiding forever. But then he caught sight of his father. Manuel de la Cruz stood small and tired by the exit doors, his calloused hands twisting the edge of his janitor's uniform. Their eyes met just for a second, and in that glance Miguel saw everything: fear, shame, helplessness, and a flicker of something else, hope. Miguel's chest tightened painfully. He straightened his spine. He wouldn't run, not tonight. The clapping grew louder, more impatient, tinged with cruelty. Miguel set the broken broom down carefully beside him, as if laying down a weapon. Slowly, he rolled his shoulders back, took a deep, grounding breath. The room buzzed with anticipation. The spotlight above heated his skin, painting him in stark relief against the velvet curtains. A stage meant for the heirs of politicians and businessmen now held a boy in battered sneakers and hand-me-down jeans. Ethan laughed. "He's chickening." Out, Miguel's hands curled into fists, nails digging into his palms. No, not this time. Without a word, he closed his eyes, shutting out the faces, the sneers, the taunts. In the silence behind his lids, he found something steady, the memory of his mother's humming lullabies, the rhythm of Manila streets pulsing under his feet, the pure, unfiltered joy he once found in dancing when no one was watching. He began to move. No music, no preparation, just raw instinct. A simple nod of his head, a tap of his heel, then another, then a spin, a low sweep of his arm that flowed into a pop of his shoulders. His body seemed to breathe the beat that only he could hear. The laughter faltered, some phones lowered, blinking uncertainly. Miguel's feet moved faster, stomping and gliding across the polished wood, dust motes swirling around him like gold dust in the stage lights. His hands cut through the air, carving invisible shapes. Each twist of his torso, each sharp pop of his arms told a story none of them had cared to know. His story. The auditorium, moments ago roaring with derision, fell eerily quiet. Ethan stopped smiling. Miguel felt the change like a current in the air. His pulse pounded harder, driving him forward. He dropped into a flawless knee spin, slid backwards across the floor, then snapped back to standing in one fluid, electrifying move. A gasp rippled through the crowd. No one was laughing now. The final move, a clean, powerful freeze balanced perfectly on one hand, left Miguel poised like a statue, his shadow stretching long and proud across the stage. Silence. Heavy, stunned, breathless silence. Miguel rose slowly, chest heaving, and met the eyes of every person, staring at him. Their faces had changed, from mockery to disbelief, from amusement to awe. He had shown them, he had shown himself. But the night, the real battle, was only just beginning. Miguel de la Cruz wiped the sweat from his brow as he scrubbed the marble floors of Crestmont Academy, the prestigious arts school where he had been invisible for the last 5 years. His father, Manuel, a janitor here, had worked tirelessly to make sure Miguel could attend this school, a dream he himself had long since abandoned. The academy's grandeur felt like a distant world. Magnificent chandeliers hung from the ceiling like stars suspended in time. Golden frames bordered pristine mirrors, each reflecting the image of wealth, privilege, and the elite. The walls were adorned with lavish paintings, abstract, colorful, strokes that screamed money, power, and status, but Miguel could never afford to look at them the same way. For him, it wasn't about art, it was survival. He moved quietly through the hallways, pushing the heavy cart filled with cleaning supplies. His sneakers, worn from years of use, squeaked against the glossy floor. His eyes flitted nervously to the side, where the students from the performing arts programs gathered, dressed in their fancy tights, tutu skirts, and sparkling shoes, laughing, their world a realm that Miguel could never hope to enter. The academy had always been divided into 2 worlds, them and us. Them being the students, the talented, the rich, the ones whose parents paid for private lessons in ballet, voice, piano, and art. And us, people like Miguel, who worked silently in the background, unnoticed, seen only when a floor needed scrubbing or the trash needed taking out. He had long accepted it. His father told him to keep his head down and work hard. "This is what pays the bills, son. One day, you'll be thankful for it," Manuel would always say. But Miguel couldn't ignore the ache in his chest, the yearning that welled up inside him whenever he looked at those students practicing, dreaming of the stage. Miguel's love for dance wasn't born from glittering lights or audience applause. It was something deeper. He had grown up dancing to the rhythm of the streets, the sound of old hip-hop beats, the rhythm of the world around him. His mother, who passed away when he was young, was the first to introduce him to dance. She had been a vibrant woman with a loud laugh, a woman who found joy in the small things, whether it was a rainy afternoon or the warmth of a cracked radio playing music at full blast. Miguel's memory of her was simple. She would dance around their small apartment, humming along to the music, as if the world couldn't touch them. She taught him how to move, how to lose yourself in the beat, how to let the rhythm set you free. When she passed, that love for movement stayed with him, but he had no way to hone it, no way to practice in the ways the students at Crestmont did. The halls of Crestmont Academy echoed with the sound of them, the students. They were always laughing, always practicing, always preparing for the next grand performance. They spoke in the language of art and exclusivity, discussing which dance instructor was the best, which costume designer created the most stunning outfits. Miguel was invisible to them. His world was one of quiet, unseen labor. But sometimes, when no one was around, when the last bell rang and the hallway emptied of voices, Miguel would sneak into one of the ballet studios. The doors were usually locked, but he knew how to get in. He would close the door behind him and breathe in the musty scent of the hardwood floor. Then he would stand in front of the mirror, silent, still, before he started. The first time he tried to dance, he felt ridiculous. The movements were awkward, stiff. But as the hours passed, he grew more confident, more fluid. His body remembered the beat that he had once shared with his mother. His feet moved across the floor with a freedom that was rare for him in the academy. It was a small thing, dancing when no one was looking, but it was his escape, his solace. He wasn't Miguel the janitor's son then, he was Miguel the dancer. The Academy's grand recital was just around the corner, a night of opulence, flashing cameras, and standing ovations. Miguel had always watched from the sidelines, a bystander to the glitz and glamour, unable to be a part of it. That night, as the hallways filled with whispers about who would perform, who would win awards, who would be the next big star, Miguel felt more out of place than ever. The whispers of the rich kids cut through the air like daggers, and his father's tired eyes, always searching for something better for him, lingered in the back of his mind. One day, as he pushed his cleaning cart through the hallway, Miguel overheard the conversation of the school's top ballerinas, led by Zara Langston, the academy's brightest star. She was always surrounded by her followers, laughing and practicing her routines with precision. They would always speak about dance as if it were some God-given privilege, something he could never access. Zara's voice was loud, confident. "Oh, I can't wait to show off my new routine at the recital," she said. "It's going to blow everyone away. We're going to blow everyone away." Miguel glanced up, almost as if he could melt into the walls. Zara caught his gaze and smirked. Her followers giggled. "What are you staring at, janitor?" Zara sneered. "Didn't your father teach you to clean?" Miguel's face flushed, but just as he turned away, another voice, this time soft, but equally commanding, cut through. "Leave him alone, Zara. He's just doing his job." Miguel didn't dare look up to see who had spoken, but Zara's laughter echoed down the hall. That night, Miguel lay awake in his small room above the apartment his father rented. The streets outside were quiet, but his thoughts roared inside his mind. Why wasn't he good enough? The injustice stung, but he never allowed it to show on the surface. He was supposed to be the invisible worker, the one who made everything work. In the background, unnoticed, unseen, but in the silence of that night, something shifted. For the first time, Miguel wondered if his love for dance could ever be enough. Would he ever be able to stand on that stage, to prove to everyone that he had something to offer? The harsh world of Crestmont, with its glittering halls and empty promises pressed down on him. The dream felt too big, the walls felt too tall. But the yearning in his heart, his secret love for movement whispered, urging him forward. Tomorrow, things would change. Miguel de la Cruz knew the rules of Crestmont Academy better than most students, the unwritten ones, the ones no one ever talked about. You stayed invisible. You cleaned up the messes they made. You kept your head down, and you never, ever challenged their world. And if you were a janitor's son, you didn't even dream of stepping onto the stage, much less performing. But tonight was different. The annual Gala of Stars, the event where the school's elite would shine their brightest, had arrived. The air buzzed with excitement as families in evening gowns and tuxedos milled around, flaunting their wealth, their success, their perfect lives. The auditorium, with its velvet drapes and sparkling chandeliers, was packed. The stage was set for the evening's finale, the closing performance where the best of Crestmont's dancers would showcase their skills in front of a distinguished audience. Miguel, standing quietly by the stage, had already been cleaning, up after dinner service. He could hear the muffled sounds of rehearsals coming from behind the curtains, the shuffling of dancers' feet, the faint music of a piano, the occasional high-pitched voice barking out instructions. He wasn't supposed to be here, not really. As he swept the floors near the backstage area, he tried not to watch them. The elite students, led by Ethan Mercer, the school's golden boy, and Zara Langston, the star ballerina of the academy, all moved with grace and confidence. They were untouchable, surrounded by an aura of privilege that Miguel would never break into. Yet, despite everything, he couldn't help but watch. Ethan caught his gaze. The moment Miguel's eyes met Ethan's, everything shifted. There was no friendly greeting, no politeness, only a sneer. Ethan, the top performer at Crestmont, swaggered over, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. He had always hated Miguel, not for any real reason, just because he was there, and Ethan could smell weakness from a mile away. Well, if it isn't the janitor's son. Shouldn't you be cleaning toilets or something?" Ethan said, loudly, his voice cutting through the noise of the students around him. The others fell silent, turning their heads toward Miguel. Their expressions twisted with amusement. Miguel's stomach sank. He was used to this. He had been ignored, ridiculed, dismissed countless times. But the way Ethan said it, the confidence, the power in his words, it made Miguel feel smaller, even more insignificant. Miguel didn't respond. He simply continued to sweep, pretending not to care, though his heart hammered painfully in his chest. Ethan, however, wasn't finished. "You know, it's the gala tonight," Ethan continued, taking a step closer, his voice lowering to a mock whisper that only Miguel could hear. "And I've heard rumors that you like to dance. Funny, I never thought someone like you would be into such things." The way Ethan said it, someone like you, was laced with venom, a reminder of who Miguel was, and more importantly, who he would never be. The laughter of the surrounding students echoed, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Miguel's hands shook, but he kept sweeping. He wanted to disappear, to shrink into the shadows, to escape. But then Ethan's voice rang out again, cutting through the noise. "I think you should show us your moves, janitor boy. Right here, right now. Go on, dance for us." A sharp laugh erupted from the group, and even Zara Langston's lips curled into a smug grin. The others followed suit, some whispering, others outright mocking him. "Dance for us, janitor boy." Miguel felt the weight of their gazes, their judgment, their disdain, pressing down on him like 100-pound stone. His heart raced, and the thought of leaving, of walking out, of running away, anything felt so tempting. But then his father's face flashed in his mind, the tired lines on his face, the constant struggle just to keep them afloat. This was the man who had worked so hard, who had made sacrifices Miguel would never fully understand. Miguel couldn't let his father down, not like this. "You're gonna let them walk all over you?" Ethan's voice rang out again. "Or are you going to show us what you've got? I dare you. Prove you're not just a worthless janitor." The words hit Miguel like a slap. His jaw clenched, his fists tightening around the broom. For a moment his body was still, his mind in turmoil. His pulse pounded in his ears, his thoughts racing faster than his heartbeat. He had to make a choice, let them see him as nothing, more than the janitor's son, or do something that would force them to see him. A flicker of memory sparked in his mind. The quiet moments in the janitor's closet, when he had practiced his dance moves alone. The beats, the rhythm, the freedom. The anger he felt in this moment, the frustration, suddenly found its release in his body. Before he could second-guess himself, he stepped forward, past Ethan and Zara, into the center of the room. The crowd stilled for a moment, uncertain, confused by his sudden boldness. "You want me to dance?" Miguel's voice was steady, too steady, betraying nothing of the fear bubbling beneath. "Fine." He threw aside his broom. The students looked at each other, still unsure if this was a joke. Miguel closed his eyes for a second, focusing. The memories of his mother's dance, her graceful movements that once filled the quiet apartment, filled him. The first step was hesitant, but as his body moved, he felt something click into place. His feet found the rhythm, his body found the groove. Each motion came with an explosion of feeling, as if the music had taken over him. He danced with everything he had, every part of him that longed for something more. His movements were raw, authentic, something no one at Crestmont had ever expected. For a few seconds it was just him, the music and the release. But then the silence hit, a profound silence. They had stopped laughing. The mocking faces were now wide-eyed, unsure how to respond to this unexpected display of defiance. But then the ultimatum hit as Miguel's breath grew ragged, his chest heaving. He heard the voice again, loud, cruel, and unforgiving. "Impressive," Ethan sneered. "But it's not enough. If you want to stay here, if you want your dad to keep his job, you'll have to prove you belong. Dance at the gala's closing performance, or you'll be out, and so will your father." Miguel's heart stopped. He looked over at his father in the crowd, who had witnessed everything, his face filled with worry. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. He was being forced into a corner. The humiliation, the sacrifice, It all hung in the balance. The days following Ethan's ultimatum felt like an eternity. Miguel lay awake each night, his body burning with exhaustion, his mind consumed by the upcoming gala. Each day was a blur of cleaning, sweeping, mopping, and pretending to ignore the whispers of the students around him. Every moment felt like the weight of his father's job hung in the balance. A tightrope Miguel had to walk without falling. The school's grand event loomed closer, and Miguel knew he couldn't afford to fail. Each night after the academy emptied, when the lights flickered out and the hallways grew eerily silent, Miguel would sneak into the janitor's closet and close the door behind him. The broom, the mop, the buckets, they weren't tools for cleaning anymore. They had become his dance props, his partners in a dance he had no right to perform. He could still hear Ethan's voice echoing in his mind. "Dance for us," the words made his chest tighten, but they also made his resolve harder, like steel. Miguel wasn't just going to dance for them, he was going to make them see him. He was going to show them that he wasn't just the janitor's son. His practice sessions were never easy. The mirrors in the janitor's closet were scratched, old, and cracked. The floor, though polished in places, was uneven and sticky from cleaning supplies. But Miguel didn't care. The imperfections of the space, the claustrophobic atmosphere, only pushed him harder. He danced to the rhythm in his mind, closing his eyes and allowing his body to move, every step filled with raw emotion. His feet stumbled, his arms ached, but he kept going. Every muscle screamed, but the fear in his heart was louder. What if he couldn't do it? What if he failed in front of everyone? What if Ethan was right all along? But then, as he faltered one night, a memory surged to the surface. His mother. She had been his first teacher. She had been the one to introduce him to the rhythm of life, the flow of movement. In their small apartment they had danced together. She would turn on the old record player, and the crackling sound of old jazz would fill the room. Miguel remembered how her laugh would echo as she twirled him around the cramped space, her movements so effortless, so full of grace. He could almost hear her now. "You've got this, Miguel. Dance like no one's watching. Dance for you. Dance for us." The memory made his chest ache. His mother had always believed in him. And now, as he faced the impossible task ahead of him, Miguel could feel her presence in every move, in every breath. His body moved with purpose, a leap, a spin, a jump. He pushed through his doubts, through the exhaustion. He wasn't going to fail, not again. But as the days dragged on, Miguel couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching him. Each morning, when he stepped into the hallways to begin cleaning, there were whispers. Ethan and his group never left him alone. They would whisper in the corners of the cafeteria, snicker behind closed doors, their mocking words following him like a shadow. "They think he's good enough to dance? Please, he's just a janitor's son. He's nothing." Miguel's chest tightened at the sound of their voices. He would clench his fists and force himself to look ahead, to not let their words get to him. But it was hard, so much harder than it seemed. One afternoon, as he was mopping the corridor near the ballet studio, he heard the familiar voice of Zara Langston. She had been one of the worst. Her cruel smirk had always made him feel like less. Miguel had often seen her practicing in the studio, her movements flawless and pristine, so precise, so perfect. "Well, well, look who's still cleaning up our mess," Zara said, loud enough for him to hear as she walked past with her entourage of snickering friends. Miguel lowered his gaze, pretending to be absorbed in his work. But inside, a storm raged. He clenched the mop tightly, trying to calm himself. He wanted to say something back, to fight back against the constant taunts. But he knew it wouldn't change anything. He was nothing to them, just the janitors. Zara's laughter echoed down the hallway, and Miguel's heart sank. He had to get away. He couldn't let them see how much they hurt him, how badly their words cut through his already fragile confidence. That night, when he entered the janitor's closet again, the pressure felt suffocating. The cracks in the mirror seemed bigger. The dust in the corners more prominent. He felt trapped. He could feel the weight of the entire school bearing down on him. The thought of dancing in front of everyone filled him with dread. But what if he didn't? What if he couldn't perform? Couldn't meet the expectations? He couldn't lose his father's job. He couldn't let his father down. But what if he failed? What if after everything they laughed again? What if he became the joke of the school? His movements faltered again, his legs trembling beneath him. His body refused to comply, his breath ragged, chest tight with the weight of doubt. He stopped, sinking to the floor, the sound of his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Miguel felt like giving up. He wanted to. The idea of stepping onto that stage, of facing the crowd, felt too big, too impossible. His hands shook as he wiped away the sweat from his forehead. He wasn't like them. He wasn't a dancer. He was just a janitor's son, and no amount of practice could change that. Then a voice echoed in his head, his mother's voice. "Don't stop, Miguel. You have the strength in you. You have everything you need. You're not just a janitor's son. You are more than that." Miguel stood up slowly, his heart still racing. He wiped away the tears that had started to fall, but this time he didn't stop. He would not let them win. He couldn't afford to fail. For his father, for himself, he would push through. With a deep breath, he began again. Each step felt more certain than the last. The anger, the fear, it all fueled him, pushing him to dance harder, faster. He would show them. He would show them all. But as the days counted down, Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a performance anymore. It was a battle, a fight for his future. A fight to prove that he wasn't just a janitor's son. He was more, and he would do whatever it took to make them see it. Miguel's heart thudded in his chest as he stood backstage, his eyes fixed on the darkened stage beyond the curtain. The gala's finale was mere minutes away. The audience was already settling into their seats, the low hum of excited murmurs filling the air. His palms were slick with sweat, his legs trembling beneath him. Tonight wasn't just another performance. It was his moment, the moment he would prove them all wrong. But the weight of it, the immense pressure, felt like too much. His father, standing quietly by the back door, gave him a small, encouraging nod. The older man's face was worn with exhaustion, but there was something in his eyes, pride, hope, maybe even fear. Miguel had seen that look many times before. He wanted to make his father proud, to show him that everything they had sacrificed was worth it. But tonight, Miguel was doing it for himself too. The room was filled with laughter and chatter, the elite students of Crestmont already preparing for their own performances. Miguel's hands clenched around the sides of his oversized janitor's overalls, the fabric rough against his skin. He had nothing else, no designer costume, no fancy shoes, just the borrowed uniform of a worker, a cleaner, and yet he was here, on the same stage as those who thought they were better than him. The thought sent a wave of fire through his veins. "You can do this, Miguel," he whispered to himself. The music began, the soft opening chords of a classical piece, the first performance of the night. It was elegant, precise, the kind of music that made the audience close their eyes and imagine themselves in another world. But not for Miguel, not for him. He wasn't part of that world. Up next, Miguel de la Cruz, the announcer's voice rang out, echoing through the hall. Miguel's breath caught in his throat. The silence that followed was suffocating. Slowly, he stepped forward, the thick curtains brushing against his shoulders as he made his way onto the stage. The lights hit him instantly, blinding, hot, and unforgiving. His bare feet made soft, almost imperceptible sounds on the polished floor, and he swallowed hard to fight. The dry lump in his throat, he could feel the weight of the entire auditorium on him, those eyes, those judging, mocking eyes. He stood there, his body rigid with nerves, every inch of him screaming to run, to hide, to escape. But he didn't. He had no choice now. He glanced over at the front row. Ethan Mercer, his rival, sat there with a smug expression, flanked by Zara Langston and the others. They had no idea what Miguel was about to do. Ethan smirked, and just as Miguel was about to take his first step, the music stopped. A collective gasp rose from the audience. The sudden silence felt like a slap. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. Ethan, sitting comfortably in his seat, casually waved his hand. "Play something better. This kid doesn't belong here." His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear, dripping with condescension. Laughter erupted from the audience, laughter that stung, that scraped against Miguel's soul. His hands trembled at his sides, his teeth grinding together, but he couldn't stop now. He wouldn't. His father was watching, and he wasn't about to let Ethan or anyone else tell him what he could or couldn't do. Miguel closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The cold, empty space in front of him felt infinite, but he had come this far. His body ached from the countless nights of practice, but his heart surged with adrenaline. This is your moment. And then something inside him snapped, without missing. A beat, he raised his arms and started to beatbox, quietly at first, a rhythmic pulse that grew louder as his confidence grew. The sound echoed through the silent auditorium, filling the empty space with an energy that was raw, unapologetic, and real. The beat hit hard, a familiar rhythm, the same one he had practiced over and over in the janitor's closet. His body followed the beat. He shifted his weight, planted his feet, and in an instant he was dancing, not with the elegance of ballet or the perfection of formal training, but with the raw intensity of someone who had nothing to lose. The rhythm took over, his movements a blur of energy. His hands snapped in quick gestures, his feet skittered and slid, his body twisting and turning in ways that seemed impossible. The crowd fell silent once more, this time in shock. Miguel's moves were electric, unrefined, but filled with such energy that it was impossible to look away. Each motion was an act of defiance. Each jump, each spin, every intricate twist of his body told a story of a boy who had nothing yet had everything to give, a boy who had been beaten down but refused to stay down. Miguel could hear the murmurs in the crowd, the disbelief, the awe, but he couldn't stop. His body moved without thinking, carried by the pulse of the beat he had created. His dance was messy, imperfect, but it was him. The sweat poured down his face, his chest heaving with the effort, but he didn't care. Nothing mattered but the music, the movement, and the roar of the crowd that was building, and then he hit it, the final move. A perfect, gravity-defying spin that ended with a slam into the floor, his hand holding his entire weight. For a moment, time stood still. The air hung heavy, thick with the anticipation of the audience. And then, the first clap, slow at first, hesitant, but then it grew. A single clap turned into a dozen, and then into 1,000 as the entire auditorium erupted into applause. Miguel stood up, breathless, his body trembling from the exertion, his heart pounding in his ears. He had done it. He had shown them. He wasn't the janitor's son. He was a dancer. He had just stolen the spotlight from everyone who had ever doubted him. The applause grew louder, and Miguel turned to the side, where his father stood, tears glistening in his eyes. Miguel's chest swelled. This was for him, but as the applause roared around him, Ethan's face twisted in disbelief, his smirk gone, replaced by a cold, hard scowl. He had never expected this. Miguel didn't care. The world had just shifted, and for the first time in his life he felt like he belonged. Not just in the shadows, but in the spotlight. This was his moment, and no one could take it from him. The applause felt like an explosion. Miguel stood frozen, the roar of the crowd crashing into him, so loud that his ears rang. The auditorium, once filled with derisive laughter and sneers, was now a sea of clapping hands and cheering voices. But it wasn't just noise. It was the validation he had been searching for his entire life. His breath came in sharp gasps, his chest heaving as he slowly straightened from his final position, standing tall on the stage. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't care. He had done it. Against all odds, against every voice that had told him he couldn't, Miguel had done it. But as the applause continued, another sound emerged, something that made his heart stutter. Footsteps. He turned to see Ethan Mercer standing at the edge of the stage, his fists clenched, his face twisted in disbelief and humiliation. The smug arrogance was gone, replaced by something far less dignified. His eyes locked onto Miguel, and in that moment, it was clear. Ethan was furious. Furious that Miguel had dared to take his moment. Furious that Miguel had taken the crowd's attention, their respect, from him. Miguel felt a flicker of triumph. He had always been the underdog, the invisible one. But tonight, he had taken center stage, and there was nothing Ethan could do about it. Ethan's face turned red as he stormed off, muttering curses under his breath. The crowd's applause didn't falter. They had seen something they hadn't expected, something real, and they knew without a doubt that Miguel had earned it. As the last of the claps rang out, Miguel felt a hand on his shoulder. His father, Manuel, was standing there, eyes wide, filled with awe. His lips trembled as he looked up at his son, tears welling in his eyes. "You did it, son," Manuel whispered, his voice cracking. You did it." Miguel didn't say anything. He couldn't. There were no words that could capture the depth of what he was feeling. He had always feared disappointing his father, always believed that their lives were limited by their circumstances. But now, in this single moment, he had shattered that belief. He wasn't just the janitor's son, he was a dancer, and he had proven it to everyone, including himself. The audience began to calm down, but Miguel stood there, catching his breath. He was still processing the overwhelming rush of adrenaline, the pure, unfiltered joy of finally being seen. His feet ached, his body begged him for rest, but there was something more important, something bigger happening in this very moment. A man in a sharp suit stepped forward from the crowd. His eyes were fixed on Miguel, an impressed smile on his face. He approached Miguel slowly, making his way through the lingering applause. "That was extraordinary," the man said, his voice smooth and calm, yet with a hint of excitement. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. The man extended his hand. "I'm Alexander Grayson," he said, introducing himself. "I'm with the New York Ballet Academy. We've been scouting for talent, and I must say I haven't seen a performance like that in years." Miguel's mind raced, his thoughts scrambling to catch up with the words he had just heard. New York Ballet Academy? Was he hearing this correctly? Alexander's smile widened as he continued. "You have real potential, Miguel. I've been to countless performances. But what you just did, this isn't something you learn from a book or a classroom. It's raw, it's powerful, and it's exactly what we're looking for." Miguel felt the world tilt beneath his feet. His breath caught in his throat as he glanced over at his father, whose eyes were now glistening with unshed tears. His entire body shook with emotion. What are you saying?" Miguel stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He couldn't believe it. After everything, the cleaning, the humiliation, the isolation, was he really being offered a chance? "I'm offering you a full scholarship," Alexander said, his voice steady, confident. "A chance to train with the best. The New York Ballet Academy could be your next step. We want to see what you're capable of, and we're prepared to help you get there." The words didn't make sense at first. They felt like a dream, a wild fantasy that Miguel was too afraid to believe. But as the truth began to sink in, the enormity of it all crashed into him, and he had to fight to keep his composure. He looked at his father again, who was now openly crying, his shoulders shaking with emotion. Miguel's heart swelled with pride and love. This was for him, for all of them. Miguel finally spoke, his voice filled with raw emotion. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Alexander replied with a warm smile. "You've already said everything with your dance." The world seemed to freeze for a moment, and in that frozen silence, Miguel realized how far he had come. He wasn't just the janitor's son anymore. He had proven to the world and to himself that he was more than just his circumstances. The applause began to fade, and Miguel felt a hand on his shoulder again. He turned to see his father, who pulled him into an embrace. "I'm so proud of you," Manuel said, his voice choked with emotion. "I always knew you had something special, Miguel. I always knew." Miguel held on tightly, as if the embrace could somehow anchor him to this surreal moment. "Thank you, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." But just as the moment of triumph began to settle, Miguel's eyes flicked to the corner of the stage, where Ethan stood, watching with clenched fists. There was no smug grin on his face anymore, just a look of stunned disbelief. The smile that once felt like a weapon now seemed fragile, broken. His world had been shattered by someone he thought was beneath him. Miguel didn't need to say a word. The victory was in the air, in the very way the crowd had cheered for him. He had shown them all, and in doing so, he had shown himself that there was no limit to what he could achieve. As the applause died down, Alexander turned to leave, but not before giving Miguel one last nod. "I'll be in touch," he said, a smile still on his face. Miguel watched him disappear into the crowd, the gravity of the moment settling in. The applause had long since faded. The glittering lights of the gala, once so blinding, now felt distant, like the fading echoes of a dream Miguel had never thought possible. He walked through the now empty halls of Crestmont Academy, his footsteps, the only sound breaking the silence. The day had been surreal, a whirlwind of emotions, of validation, of victory. He had danced for himself, for his father, for the memory of his mother. And in that one moment, he had stood tall, not as the janitor's son, but as Miguel, a dancer. But now, in the quiet aftermath, Miguel couldn't shake the weight of everything he had just accomplished. He had proved something to the world. Yes, but there was something deeper, something more personal that he had to face. Miguel paused at a large window, the darkened campus stretching out before him. The soft glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, and the stars above seemed impossibly far away. He exhaled slowly, his breath fogging up the glass. In the reflection, he saw a boy, a young man, who had once thought he would never be enough. The boy who had hidden in the shadows, watching others live the life he dreamed of. The boy who had been defined by his circumstances, by what others saw him as. That boy was gone now. Miguel's hands trembled slightly as he ran them through his hair. His mother's words echoed in his mind, a soft whisper in the back of his thoughts. "Don't let them define you, Miguel. You're stronger than they think." A tear slipped down his cheek, but this time it wasn't out of fear or frustration. It was a tear of release, a tear that had been building up for years. For the first time in his life, Miguel felt free. He wasn't bound by his past, by his limitations, or by what others had tried to make him believe about himself. Tonight, he had danced for his mother, and for the first time he had truly felt her presence beside him. It was as if she had guided every step, every movement. The strength in her memory had filled him, and for that he was grateful. He turned away from the window and looked back toward the stage. The auditorium was silent now, but the memories of that moment, the applause, the recognition, the feeling of proving himself still swirled in his chest. He had made it. He had shown everyone, including himself, what he was capable of. Miguel took a deep breath, feeling a new sense of resolve. His journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The New York Ballet Academy's offer still burned brightly in his mind. It was an opportunity he had never dreamed of, an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to finally take his place among the world's greatest dancers. It felt like a door had opened, a door to a future he had once only dared to dream about. But it wasn't just about the offer. It was about what came next, what he would choose. The path would be hard, but Miguel knew now that he wasn't afraid. He had walked into that academy, a boy with no future, no hope. But he was leaving as a young man with the world at his feet. And now, more than ever, Miguel knew that no one could define him but himself. As Miguel took his first step toward the future, his reflection merging with the fading light of the academy. Believe in yourself. Believe in your hidden talents. Miguel's journey had just begun. The end, or is it just the beginning? The following year, Miguel de la Cruz stood in front of a large mirror, the walls around him filled with the scent of polished wood and fresh paint. The bright lights of the New York Ballet Academy glinted down, casting a warm glow on his reflection. His uniform was now pristine, the shoes polished and fit perfectly. His posture was straighter, more confident. He had learned to move with precision, to dance not just with his body, but with his heart. He had come a long way from the dusty hallways of Crestmont Academy, from the boy who had been laughed at and ridiculed. Now he was no longer just the janitor's son. He was Miguel de la Cruz, a dancer. The very thought filled him with awe. He had kept his promise to himself and to his late mother. Tonight the academy would hold a performance, a culmination of all the training, the sweat, and the late nights. Miguel stood backstage, looking out at the empty seats, imagining the audience that would soon fill the space, waiting to see what he had become. He couldn't help but smile. He had earned his place here, and yet, as the lights dimmed and the music began, something inside him reminded him of the journey he had taken, of the people who doubted him and the people who believed. He thought of his father, sitting in the audience, proud and hopeful, just as he had been the night of the gala. But it wasn't just about them anymore. It was about Miguel, the person he had become, the dancer he had fought to become. As the performance unfolded, Miguel moved across the stage with the fluidity of someone who had found their calling. The audience watched in awe as he executed every leap, every turn, with strength and grace. He wasn't perfect, he never would be, but he had something that could never be taught: heart. And when the final note of the music played and the final step landed, the applause was deafening. But this time, Miguel didn't just stand still. He took a bow, a silent promise in his heart. This is just the beginning. Miguel's journey had led him to places he had never dreamed of. He had fought to define his worth, to prove that his background did not dictate his future. And now, with every dance, he was rewriting the story of who he was, no longer bound by the limitations of his past, but free to pursue whatever he dared to dream.